Thanks for joining us. Special edition of Open Line. Nick Beres with legal analyst Nick Leonardo talking justice for Joe Clyde. The trial beginning next week, finally, 3 years after the little boy disappeared. A lot of good Facebook questions and comments followed this case closely, folks have. John, again, has had several, I think, good points. And he's asking you, Nick, do you think at this point they have any appealable issues that could be something to take note of even before the trial?
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime the judge makes a decision, and not just Judge Wolf, any judge in his position, it sets up an appealable issue, especially, every one of these confessions or alleged confessions that they have, I think there are 4 or 5 of them, each one of them have to be examined individually to determine the facts and the totality of the circumstances surrounding when that confession was made. And so if the judge rules that they're admissible, then obviously that's going to be a significant appealable issue. There could be issues with the bond and the release. That could be significant issues. However, if they are convicted, that could be harmless error. But any sort of pretrial ruling that any judge makes, and especially in a case like this, when there's a high likelihood of conviction, or if you are convicted, it's a lot of prison time, there's certainly going to be appealable issues. Anything that's being decided now by the judge would be an appellate issue. That
they're going to take note of. Absolutely. It's interesting. A lot of people, grew up in Dixon. Erin says she was born and raised in Dixon, and this is not the hometown I grew up in, but Joe was always unstable in school, she said. And then Donna is saying, I could spend hours telling you all outlandish stories Joseph would tell me. Just trying to learn more about
collaboration. I mean,
well, these are just people that knew him, right?
But it's probably not going to be hard to find that.
And that's probably going to be part
small town. People know everybody.
Yeah, they know, and maybe. Well, now, and I don't know if that necessarily takes it as like, well, yes, he's a child killer, or that he's crazy enough to go ahead and confess to killing his child when he didn't. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like he was a quirky guy.
It sounds like he talked,
or is a quirky guy, and he talked. Yes. Let's go next to Elaine. Elaine, good evening. Hi, Elaine.
Hey.
What's on your mind?
Okay, I'm thinking, just because they didn't find any blood doesn't mean he didn't kill him, because he could have choked him or he could have suffocated him.
That's true. That's good.
Also, if he was to be not found guilty, can they do something about him taking them on wild goose chases trying to remember where the body is?
There would be lesser crimes. Certainly he's someone who you could argue is interfered with an investigation, giving false witness. There's lesser, but the biggie here is the homicide. Anything less than that for him is a win.
Well, and so, when I looked, I believe he's charged with 6 counts in an indictment, and one of them is tampering with evidence.
Right.
And so I guess the question...
Well, that would be getting rid of the body. Right?
Potentially, but you've got to have to prove that, or an impeding an investigation. So, because of this gag order, we don't have all the underlying facts that maybe we would normally have going into this. And interestingly enough, the gag order was lifted for a period of time, and then it was reinstated.
I think it's because someone did a story between that, and they decided to reinstitute it. I wonder who that was.
But it's almost impossible to find out when you received that information, because there was a period of time it wasn't in effect.
Exactly. Now, there's been a back and forth gag order, and there's a gag order that stands right now, and that's fine. It'll all be lifted when the trial starts. So let's go to Philip. Philip, good evening. Hi, Philip.
Hey, Nick. Big fan. I have a problem with when he called 911, what he said was, my son has escaped.
Mm-hmm.
Who would say that? My child is left, but who would say my child has escaped?
Great point. But I think there's a context here. We have heard from the defense attorney that Joe Clyde, an autistic child, very precocious, and had a habit of getting out of the house. And they would try to latch the door to keep him from getting out, but he would do it, and they'd try to keep him in. So I could see how a parent might say, if it's happened so many times, he escaped again. That's kind of the context I take it at, that he did have a history of going out, even sometimes at night. And they'll try to make that case.
Well, and I think, if you're questioning these jurors, which they're getting ready to do next week, obviously, any parent that has an autistic child, you're probably going to want them on that jury if you're the defense, because of that very issue, because that's probably going to be part of the defense again, is that, he got out, he was hard to control, he was on a regular basis. He would go out. We'd have to go looking for him. But again, they didn't find any DNA in the house that showed there was any signs of a struggle.
Do you think real quick, we have a minute before we have to go to our final break. They didn't find any DNA in the house. And some people say, well, gosh, that there was nothing there? Was the house wiped clean?
Well, no, I mean, obviously there's DNA in every house. Your pet could carry your DNA.
Okay.
I just think that what they were doing in this particular case, they were looking for any sign of a struggle, and then they would take that piece of carpet, that particular garment, and evaluate it for DNA. But there's absolutely no way that anybody could wipe their house clean of their child's DNA, from toothbrushes to the salt and pepper shakers to his favorite little sippy cup. I mean, you're going to have DNA of that child somewhere in that house.
Okay, and I do know that I've been in the home and I've seen the swaths of carpet that they cut up to be tested and to look for what. And that woman's correct. It's possible he could have killed the child without causing any bleeding. I mean, that certainly could happen. So, all right, listen, we're going to take a break. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this.